recorded.
That's something a lawyer would say. And that's lawyer Paul slash, if you listen to Funny Book Forensics, which you probably don't, that's jujitsu lawyer Paul. And this is my new podcast, Abs at 50. And I'm Dan, and I don't have abs at 50 yet, but jujitsu lawyer Paul slash Paul Boudreau slash coach Paul slash owner of Certified Martial Arts. It's a lot of slashes for you.
I have many titles.
Yeah. But yeah, you can go to this guy for legal services and he can choke out the other lawyer. So it can help you out. But we're not here for legal services today. I talked to Paul like a month ago and going on a quest, and we'll see how well I make it. And if you listen to our other podcast, has nothing to do with comic books, but I'm still wearing my Funny Book Forensic shirt. Maybe I'll have abs at 50 shirt, or maybe I'll just have no shirt on later because I'll have abs. Could be, you never know what's going to happen on this podcast. But I think the big thing here, we wanted you to join us on this journey. So I decided almost a month ago, just under a month on my birthday, on October 31st, that I was going to get abs at 50 because I've been working out for on and off consistently for a while, but on for what, a good 3 years, right, Paul?
We've been working out together consistently for about 1.5. And then you were working out with Dylan
Working with
previously.
another coach.
Yeah. So I think you've had structured coaching in your workouts for the last 3 years. I mean, you even through injury, you've still been relatively active in the last, I'd say, 10 years. And like with anything, it's ebbs and flows, but I'd say you've had more.
And 10 years ago, I weighed 9 years ago. I weighed 169 pounds at one point but no muscle. So I started training seriously. I lost a lot of weight, went from 238 pounds. I don't want to lie. Let's not go up there too much, right? To 169 pounds. And then settled in for a long time right at the 195 area after putting muscle back on.
You had some muscle, but you were not in proportions to where you are now. That's for sure.
Yeah. And then over time, stress, job, just life got back all the way up to 228. I wouldn't say it was a 228 that was embarrassing by any means to me personally. And by the way, when I say things like that, I want everybody to know that's listening, those are my personal feelings. We'll do an episode later on body dysmorphia.
Yeah.
So I don't want people to think that I'm criticizing them or have any feelings about how they look. I'm all about how I look. Like that's like this whole journey is one of the goals of this is because I think I have too much fat around my belly and I want to live a long time and do lots of neat things. I want to lose that body fat.
And I have made this point to you before. We'll definitely talk about the body image issues in depth at some point, but I think just from a physiological level, particularly around the midsection, the less visceral fat you have around the midsection, the healthier you tend to be. I think that's super true. So
Yeah. And there are a couple of other markers I came in with too that prompted this journey besides just wanting to lose a little bit more weight. But in the last year and a half, I've gone from 228 pounds to I was at 211 when we started. And and we did it the nice, slow, consistent way. But I think probably the one big thing I wasn't really paying attention to consistently was diet. I ate whatever I wanted. Is that a fair?
I would say that you didn't eat with reckless abandon, as I think some Americans might do. We don't eat tons of fast food, but in no way were we measuring, right? I mean, it's just the Hawthorne effect. Like if you measure it, it affects change to a higher degree. And so I think that we have implemented a training strategy for both function and fitness that has achieved goals of helping you lose weight and get strong, but the specific percentage of weight loss and body percentage was not the focus. And so,
Yeah, and I would even say the weight loss was just a effect of getting stronger.
yeah,
More than and getting better balance and getting better movement as opposed to focusing on weight loss or fat loss. And because Trader Joe's dark chocolate peanut butter cups are really good. And if I'm stressing out in a work day, I would buy some at Trader Joe's and then grab 5 and eat them, which isn't ideal if you're trying to lose the visceral fat around your midsection.
Yeah. I think the big point, if there is a takeaway that people will have from this, is you know, you have to use the Billy Bean line, right? You got to think about it in the aggregate.
Right.
Um, and I think it just goes back to the idea of small things compounding over time, where it's like, again, it's just like having a budget. Like if you're just not paying attention to it, it can kind of run loose. The same thing where it's like, oh, you know, what's a handful? I mean, it could be anything, right? It could be, it's just like when we can't have cashews around the house because we're going to, you know, take palms full of cashews, which are, you know, relatively healthy fats. That's probably pretty good for you. And in moderation, they're really great. But it's like, if you're just pounding handfuls of them in addition to your diet, like you can have 500-600 calories in no time
Yeah.
and not realize it.
We'll laugh about that because I was just talking to Paul about that. Like I measured out some cashews the other day and like the serving's a quarter cup.
It's
It's 10 or 11 cashews and that's what you get. And that was what 150 calories or something like that. It's it's good, and I'm not saying don't eat n but by the way, we'll do episodes on food and things like that later on. I'm not saying don't eat nuts, we're just saying, yeah, keeping, delicious cashews around the house, grabbing a handful or 2. Yeah, we were joking about that the other day too. I said, "You like to eat the pistachios out of the shell," and I'm like, "We need them in the shell so I don't go as fast."
yeah.
You have to open those things. But we'll talk about food at a different time. We'll have a lot of different topics we talk about in the end of this podcast too. We'll go back through and give you a preview of some of the things we'll talk through during the weeks of this journey and try to share with you. I don't know if I'm going to share a bunch of recipes or anything like that, but one thing we'll definitely talk about is like food or cooking from home. Like just even learning to cook from home can it really help on a journey like this. You can control more inputs, and the more inputs you can control, the more you can standardize what you're doing.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, as inflation has been increasing, I think it's also just a recently proven thing that more people are probably looking into, as you know, even the more common previous fast food alternatives that we would wholesale like to not be a part of anyway, as delicious as they might be. They're of course manufactured that way. But
When I see a lot of people going to things like Factor and stuff like that too,
yeah,
and that's fine. Whatever you need to, like, get what you want into your body is fine with me, but I do think there are cheaper ways than doing Factor, and we can
yeah,
meal prep a whole bunch of chicken and rice on a weekend, make really good food. And when Paul and I talk about food too, like, I eat good food. Yeah, it's just I'm not eating, like, piles of pizza every day or anything like that, but I don't eat terrible food.
no, we probably will be cutting down on the amount of mashed potatoes that we've been eating. So we had some tonight.
But those are delicious.
They are
And by the
delicious.
way, as we do this, we're coming to you. You won't hear this on Thanksgiving, but we're recording this on Thanksgiving. We thought this would be the most hilarious possible day to record the first episode because, and definitely, this is also the first day in 2 weeks I did not stick to my calorie intake levels, and nor should you do it every day. That's insanity.
Yeah, when we were talking about it at the beginning, it's, you know, it comes down to basic numbers, right? And this is, again, averages, lots of different things that go into it. You can always get lots of them in your show. I mean, I've been, you know, I'm not clinically trained in being in fitness, but I've been studying fitness and lifting and health and all different kinds of stuff for, you know, 12 years now. And you can always get lost in minutia, but I think that you just have to try to find some general rules, heuristics, if you will, that help you out. And, you know, the amount of calories you need to be cutting in order to give yourself the best chance of losing weight is about 3,500 calories within a week. That's if you're going to try to, you know, that the caloric amount to lose a pound, hopefully, if mostly of fat, is going to be about 3,500 calories, give or take. You could go into very effective foods and all different kinds of things, but that's just broad strokes. If you reduce the amount of calories you're eating every single week right now by 3,500 calories, you are almost a third the gonna lose weight. Particularly if you are actually tracking it. That's something that in my review and study what the experts are saying, not just what I see, but what experts have informed the public and me generally is, people are like, if you're doing like epidemiological studies, like those are terrible. Like self-report, people are awful at self-reporting just because you just misjudge. I mean, it's just, I think that we as human beings oftentimes are off by a bigger factor than we ever think about in most things in our lives. And so you're like, oh, I probably eat around, 2,500 calories. And then like you sit down and just don't even eliminate anything, just track every single thing you eat in a week. You're like, no, I'm eating 3,200 calories because, I grabbed, I mean, it's just the difference between, picking up 600 extra calories in a day is just stupid easy in modern
Yep.
society in America. Like 600 calories is, you can blink and eat 600 calories. It's just not hard. It could be through, um, you know, what you're drinking, right? It's like when I very first started out, I did kind of more of an elimination diet and I just stopped drinking my calories. Like, because as DM knows, I like to drink milk. I drink a lot of milk. Didn't drink milk, gave up soda. Like soda is the other one. You're probably gaining 10 pounds. Like if you're a regular soda drinker, you're probably getting 10 pounds a year just from the soda and sugar. So it just, that's like the very first one. That's like if you need a place to eliminate your calories, try to go to zero sugar. And then if you're worried about artificial sweeteners, again, something else you talked about forever, is just like I won't drink my calories. And that means you're drinking water and tea and not for Dan, but most other Americans drinking some kind of coffee or something. Not putting, tons of milk and creamer and sugar in it. That's the other thing is like if you go and buy coffee, man, I just and I get, I finally had one because I just come off of doing 2 cuts, right? And I finally went and had just one of the small coffees at Whole Foods. But I mean, they just dump tons of sugar into that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely not good for you.
You have to pay attention to that. And then, yeah, and we'll spend some more time on different episodes too, talking about that. My process originally was to start eliminating different types of breads and pastas from the house and start looking at alternatives. I think there's a lot of ways that elimination thing, you can do it a lot of ways. But it's also to even in looking, I eat fairly, I don't want to say clean, but a fairly decent calorie amount when, to your point, I'm not grabbing a handful of dark chocolate covered almonds or grabbing peanut butter cups or like you said, grabbing like for me, it wouldn't be like a coffee, but it'd be more like you were talking about mashed potatoes, right? Am I eating a potato with a little bit of butter on it, or am I eating the mashed potatoes I make where I dump milk and butter and everything in there and then blend them all together? I think there's a difference, right? And you can pay attention to that. But you can still take a Yukon Gold potato, which are my favorites, and eat one with a little bit of butter and pepper and salt on it and be fine. But when you add the milk, when you add a whole stick of butter, which I do to 5 potatoes, and then you scramble that all together, now you're looking at a very dense creamed potatoes, which is what I made tonight for Thanksgiving. And it was great, but I can't do that probably every day. And another thing too, I want to get into we want to cover a couple things on this podcast as we get going. We want to talk about why I'm doing it, and we started talking a little bit about that. We'll talk about the goal that we're setting, and then we'll get into a little bit about how we're going to do it and some of the limitations I have. And then in the next few podcasts, we'll come up with some more information to share with you as we go down the road. But let's start a little bit more at the why. So we mentioned the visceral fat. I mentioned my body weight and how a lot of this too for me, the why is, hey, I've been doing these workouts for several years now. Now it's time. I just want to dial it in. I want to see what I can really do out of it. So it's more like a challenge to myself just to see where I can go. And then a couple of other reasons why so I'm going to a doctor quarterly during this process. Had my yearly checkup and my cholesterol was a little bit high. I realized that in the process of losing weight, my cholesterol actually could go up. So I'm definitely going to make sure a doctor is checking that as I'm going through. But I also know in the long run, carrying less fat in my body and eating a little bit cleaner, my cholesterol is going to go down. So, but I would just caution folks too, if you go on this journey with us or if you try this yourself, make sure you're seeing a medical professional on a regular basis. So I'm 50 years old. That's why it's called Abs at 50. So do make sure you're seeing a medical professional because your cholesterol actually can elevate in the weight loss journey as things are flushing out of your bodies. So just be cautious of that. And don't take my word for it. Take your medical provider's word for it as you're going through and checking those things. So I mentioned continuing the journey, getting rid of visceral fat, the high cholesterol. There are a couple of other point reasons I'm doing this. One is just the aesthetic piece. That's the stomach fat. The stomach fat has a health aspect. It's also aesthetic, right? Like I don't like continuing to have that visceral stomach fat as I'm doing all this. I feel like I work really hard and then I've gotten like better shape in other parts of my body, like my biceps and triceps and shoulders and chest. And then the fat still sits there. It's just really annoying me. So maybe that's not a thing for you, and that's cool. If you're not
You
worried
can
about
say
the
it.
aesthetics, that's
You
fine,
can say,
but do it
yeah,
for the health.
it's for vanity. You could say it.
Yeah. It is. Yeah. I said aesthetics. Isn't that vanity? Yeah. I want to look good. The other, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And as
Nope.
soon as I say look good, somebody's going to criticize me and he's saying looking this way is not good and looking this way is good. No, I'm saying for Dan, for me, I want to look better around my waist because I don't like the look of the visceral fat. People, I can judge whatever they want, look however they want. That's fine. But I'm making this decision for me. So it is vanity. Paul's not wrong. And then there's a couple of other things too. I want to do some more. There's a couple of activities I want to do. I may want to go on a like cycling ride in Norway. I want to get a little bit better, increase some cardio stamina. I do have some limitations we'll talk about at the end. One of them is workout induced asthma. So some of those things I just may not be able to do. But one of the things Paul and I have talked over the last 3 months before this journey started is for me to make sure I don't say I can't, even though I have limitations. So we've changed the word I can't to is that advisable? So if I ask Paul, we'll talk through something and then we'll decide if it's advisable for me to do something, right? So is it advisable for me to run uphill in the cold with asthma? Uh, Not unless I have an inhaler with me and somebody else with me. That would may not be advisable. For me to go out on a run up a mountain by myself in the cold would be stupid, right, Paul?
Unless you're being chased by America's number one threat, the bear.
Yes, number one threat is the bear. We'll worry about the asthma later. But so I can look at the world and say, is that advisable? But I'm trying to cut the I can't out of it so we can discuss it as opposed to me just shutting down things as I go. That's another one of the whys. And we've started doing that already, eliminating the I can't terminology. And that's what got me to this actually, because I thought my first thought when I started thinking about doing this and getting to talk with Paul was, I can't get to abs. And then I turned around and I said, oh, I said I can't. So then is it advisable for me to get abs? I don't know. We talked about it last year. We said no. And this year you said yes. What changed the answer?
Well, I think for me, what I have said to you is not that it's not advisable, per se, right? So I don't think the previous answer was no. I think that my blanket statement has always been the methodologies that I would prescribe for people to have abs, like the moments in my life in training when I found out the most defined abs and actually, am somewhat pleased with how I look. It's times obviously when I'm training in the sport that I do, but also when I'm doing just very heavy amounts of running. I mean, that's just it. All the fighters and all the people that I know is like, you're either going to be doing running or swimming, and Dan can't do either of those at a particularly high level for physiological reasons beyond his control. And I've known Dan a very long time, and one of the other ways that I help keep control and manage my weight for the sport that I'm in, and the ways that I have to do it is I do a lot of intermittent fasting when I'm concerned about my weight. That works for me. Again, long conversation we can go into about all that stuff, but over the years, I do well in training without having eaten. I can train long periods of time, very hard through most parts of the day. And if I really feel down, I can eat like a protein bar or something and I'm fine. but for the most part, I can make it through most of the day relatively unfazed. Like, I'm always in the best mood. People have told me that. They can tell when I'm not eating, but like I'm not feeling a lag in my training, which is what I care about. Like for me, it's about performance. Am I performing as well as I could when I'm not eating? Yes, oftentimes I perform best when I have it. And we can talk more about kind of the psychology of that or whatever. And what we know about Dan is Dan does not function optimally at that for his work or life or training. And so that's been another limitation. And so when you said that you wanted to do this, I just told you what you'd have to actually commit to. And I think what has changed, to go directly to your question, what has changed is your mental commitment to the process, right? Like,
Yeah.
because we have experimented, we have tried experimenting a little bit with intermittent fasting, and we just have kind of ruled that out for you for sanity's sake and the people around you, right?
Yeah.
And so, um, I think that we have to, we're having to attack it a new way, which is the other way. There's only a few ways that you're going to get sizable results, and having restrictive calorie that you're, have a very, very meticulous tracking, which is again is not out of personality phase with you. So I think that's why it has already started to be very successful and to continue to be successful. But you just have to be able to commit. And honestly, setting goals and being able to commit are like the two biggest friction points that you're going to get, anyone's going to get in their fitness journey, right? It's just like, you talked about at the beginning of the podcast is you want to make sure that you're setting those goals. You're going to achieve more when you set goals, set short goals, intermediate goals, long-term goals, and set them big, right? I've been doing that for several years. And though I haven't, I haven't won like world titles yet, like I wanted, but I've achieved a lot I would say more than when I started jujitsu, 8 years ago. Actually, I've achieved a lot and the last 8 years in both my performance and the things that I've been able to accomplish and people I've been able to meet and train with and things that I've been able to do. It's not something I probably would have contemplated 8 years ago. Um, and so when I set out to do this thing, I got really big and have set really big goals and have done continuous work to try to put myself in a position to meet those goals. And
Yeah.
honestly, in life, that's all you can do, right? Is you want to give yourself the best opportunity to succeed. And I feel like I've done that for myself. And I feel like you can do that for yourself, right? Anything can happen. And when it's in a competitive sport like mine, like this is just a 1v1, like you battling against your own urge long term. And so that's just a different battle. But it's similar in the sense that like on days when I don't want to train or I don't want to do it, you have to, it's building that discipline. I've just really like, no, I think I'll just give it a try. It's like, these people are training and doing these things all day, every day. And for you and your personal battles, you just have to try to mimic that same kind of self-discipline. And you do it through setting goals and having a meaningful desire as to why you want those goals. And I think for you, it's good that it's multifactorial, right? I think your latest health checkup was another thing that where it's just like, okay. And we can talk a lot about the cholesterol thing. It doesn't give me massive concern, but again, I'm not a doctor, so don't take any advice directly from me about cholesterol. I do have feelings about that, but as long as there's not plaques collecting in your heart significantly, I think you're okay. And it's also good to know that like you have also not been meticulously measuring your cholesterol in the way like you're measuring your food, right? Like you're not doing a blood test twice a week and measuring it after.
No, we're going to do
Well,
those quarterly. Yeah.
yeah, but even just this is like this is a snapshot in time as to what your cholesterol is. But that's not exactly how cholesterol works from a day-to-day standpoint. But we also do eat a lot of red meat, so we're also not surprised that the cholesterol was particularly
Yeah.
high.
And that's what I talked to my medical provider about too. We joked about it. I said, I'm not going to less red meat. So let's talk. But then again, I have been eating less red meat since had that appointment. And you and I talked about that too. I think let's get into the goal phase of this. So, because we did set goals and I want to say my past goals. So I worked with a trainer named Dylan Hall before I worked with Paul. Dylan is fantastic, but he's coaching track and football and doing weights for football at a high school now. So he didn't have time to coach anymore. But when we talked, the whole goal was to amp up my flexibility and mobility, right? The whole goal was to, with a bad knee, he actually worked with some of, he used to work at the University of Washington with their football team. He actually talked to some PhDs there in the departments to talk about how to work around flexibility and strength training around my knee and set up, I think, a pretty good program. And our whole discussion was, hey, in training with you, I don't want to be an old man that's hunched over at the end of my life, right? Like, I want to be standing right. That was our goal. When we got to that, and then Dylan couldn't work with me anymore, I moved on to Paul and we started working on flexibility and strength to build on what Dylan had already done. It's not like Paul just took and threw away the work that Dylan had done with me. And that was the goal we set. But you're noticing there wasn't numbers here, right? It was put on build strength. And so we've been building strength. I don't know that you put a cap number on that, right? Because I'm not training to be like the world's strongest man or training to set a record bench. But for example, through the work I did with Dylan and Paul, like I remember telling Dylan this even before we started working out together, because I went and grabbed, like, when was it 205 on the bench and did it. And he's like, you shouldn't be surprised. You sit here and do push ups on your fat behind. He didn't say behind, but fat ass all the time. So why wouldn't you be able to bench press that? So a lot of things, like I wasn't always doing traditional lifts, but we were doing a lot of different strength and tendon strength training and different things to build that up. And so then all of a sudden I could do different exercises and expand those. So when I work with Paul, it's usually gym exercises, doing a lot of body weight stuff. And then when I work out in my home gym, which we built over time, I'm doing more weights. And I think you can balance that. So those were the goals then. So now the goal this year is to make sure, one, goal number one, before I get into these numeric goals, don't lose what we built. So the goal is not to go eat nothing and then lose all the muscle mass that I built and do that. So goal number one, maintain what has been built over the last couple of years. So that's goal number one. Goal number two is to take my body fat percentage from what we started out with when we first measured at 29.8%. And this is the scary goal, Paul, because I don't know if we'll get there, but I'm going to try, down to 15%. And the that gives us a third goal of taking my body weight, which we started out of 211, down to 173 pounds to get to that 15%. So we do use a scale. We've been tracking. And what we did to look at this is we said, okay, my basal metabolic rate, and I calculated it using a calculator and calculated it out and also used a scale. We're only off by a little bit. The scale says my basal metabolic rate is 1881 calories per day that I need to maintain my weight.
Yeah.
And my calculation was 1918. Amazing how those calculators, everything was so close. So we did do it a couple ways. But with my activity level, I could be eating around 2,800 calories a day and maintain my weight. And 2,800, by the way, Paul was mentioning, hey, we can grab things, we can grab 600 calories here and there. But if you are paying attention a little bit, 2,800 calories can be hard to get to some days. If especially Paul with you only eating one meal. So I was eating 3 meals, but it can be difficult. But I'm going to stick back on goals here, so I'm not going to deviate too much from that. We also looked at a rational time weight line for losing weight and did some other calculations and looked at losing 0.7% of my body weight per week on average during this time. So we're not trying to just go and lose 10 pounds the first week. We're not doing the David Goggins. I'm not losing 60 pounds in a month to get to the army because that's not my goal, right? My goal is
101
healthy, consistent weight loss.
Yeah, 101 pounds in 3 months. So yeah,
There you go.
that's
101 pounds in 3 months. We're not doing that. Yeah. The goal is to continue healthy, consistent body fat loss, which will lead to weight loss. So remember, the weight loss is a consequence of lowering the body fat percentage. And if you're lowering your body fat percentage in the way we're planning, it's about 0.7% of your body weight per week.
Yeah, and obviously that's gonna fluctuate a percentage wise as to like what you weighed at a time, but on average. Um,
And
and I think that what I told Dave at the beginning of this was I actually heard this recently. I forget where I heard it from, but might have been on the Philosopher podcast, Modern Philosopher podcast. They're talking about that, where it's like, you don't have. I was explaining that to him today. He's like, he's like, well, what should I do today? And I was like, well, what did I
Wait
say
to
at
the
the
beginning.
beginning? Yeah, what did I say in the beginning of all of this? Is like, what do I think that you need to accomplish this in the course of about a year? You have to find a way to eliminate or reduce calories by essentially 150,000. Again, I was giving us a pretty big margin on that, but I mean, it's a lot of calories. And again, it's going to come down to averages, right? Any one day is not going to kill you, but as long as you're tracking it, you're going to know. I mean, it's just like, running a business, doing quarterly reports. Like, as long as you're on track day to day, month to month, quarter to quarter, then any one day isn't going to kill you as long as that's accounted for and budgeted into the overall loss. And again, it's, what are the ways to lose weight? You want to be in a positive nitrogen balance, and you want to be in a hypocaloric state. What that means you want to have good amounts of protein, so you're maintaining muscle mass, and you want to burn more calories than you're taking in. That is the simplest formula anyone could ever have to try to lose weight. Again, a lot more can go into it. That's like the basic framework in which you can operate. And there's only two ways to be in hypocaloric states. Number one, eat less calories. Number two, have higher input, right? Like you are higher output. You are burning more calories through walking, running, lifting, cycling, swimming, whatever it is that you're doing, you have to do more of it. And there are just a lot of factors that Dan also has to deal with. And, part of what I've been designing for him and trying to just maintain for him is, kind of like the Peter Attia mentality, right? Is like he's kind of coined that phrase of the, centenarian decathlon, right? Like, what are the 10 things you want to be able to do when you're 100?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, that's what we've been doing, right? Like, I make you, we lift weights, we do functional things, but you lift heavy things, right? You want to be able to move with weight through space, right? Like, you want to be 70 years old and be able to pick up, 30 pounds of groceries and walk them inside, right?
Yep.
Well, in order to do that, you have to be able to carry, you know, like 50% of your body weight in each hand, which is not easy to do. We have those big fat bell things that we do that are really hard to carry, that are 70 pounds each. We have the big bags that we carry around, all the different things is like, that's what you're doing in life, right? You have to be able to hold yourself up. You have to be able to do step ups. You have to, as we learned from Dan, not jump up on a box and wreck your knee for a week, but be able to step through space up onto a box and not wreck your knee for a week.
Yeah. That was that tendon on my calf that I wrecked for a minute. That was super fun. I didn't break anything, but yeah, a lot of pain. I think the other two Paul mentions lifting up a bag of groceries. Like even things like this, what isn't doesn't apply to me, but might apply to you. But like your grandkid comes up to you and wants to be picked up, right? Your dog, you're walking your dog. I have a 30-pound dog. Paul has a 30-pound dog. Dan has a 30-pound dog. She's awesome. But if she gets spooked and wants to pull one way because she gets scared all the time, that's 30 pounds of force immediately pulling. It's more than 30 pounds of force, right? But it's a lot of force. A 30-pound dog doesn't seem like it's that difficult to handle. But let me tell you, we live in the Pacific Northwest. When it's wet outside and my shoes are slick and that dog sees something coming and goes the other way, that's going to pull you. And you have to maintain, like that Paul's talking about weight in space, right? That's weight in space. That's the balance stuff I was talking about when I worked with Dylan. Just all those factors come together, and we'll talk about some of my limitations in more detail, but I don't have an ACL in my left knee. So there's another factor there, right? So that force pulls. I want to be able to protect my dog. I want to be able to protect myself, and I want to keep everything safe there. And I don't need to be falling on the ground. Don't worry, the dog will come lick my face if I fall on the ground, but that's not the goal. Like we're trying to maintain that strength and keep things going. So let's talk about the how. You start to get into it. One is to maintain the workouts we're doing, right? So we don't want to stop doing that. So Paul described some of the workouts that we're doing. I also lift heavy weights. I also walk usually 3-ish miles a day minimum. So just something for people to think about. I know people say there's a direct trade-off between walking and weightlifting. I don't think there's a direct trade-off at all because walking is something I can do with the dog,
with
go out and listen to a podcast. It's easy, but it also accomplishes multiple goals. So do the things in your life that accomplish multiple goals for you. That might not be walking. That might be getting on a bike and detoxing, right? For the day, a stressful day. That could be doing a lot of things. That could be hitting your jujitsu like Paul does, going with the team and working together, right? With a group of people, if you have that capability. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. Sometimes it's the social time at a gym. I think you should absolutely embrace those things. Whatever it is for you, maintain that. And then think of ways you can also add to it. Could you go for a walk with the dog, right? Is the poor dog always bugging you to go outside? Instead of just taking the dog outside, take the dog for a mile walk, come back. It's no big deal. Does your kid want to go play at a park? Instead of watching the kid from the sideways, do laps around the park as they're playing, right? Like there's a lot of different ways to build those things into your life. And so we do encourage you to do that. Last thing I would say about my maintenance is do what I'm doing. Find a fitness coach if you can afford it. It helps because you have an accounting built-in accountability partner and somebody who's also walking you through the workouts in a way where you're not going to hurt yourself. So if I throw a big sandbag up under my shoulders, most of the time Paul is paying attention and will make sure I don't hurt myself. And the times he's not paying attention are usually the times I'm doing something he didn't tell me to do.
Yeah, and I deal with a lot of parents as an instructor, and I think part of the thing that I would like to see just in society and in the fitness, and we're seeing the fitness space in the fitness world that people take accountability for is we often and a lot of parents do it, and I think it is becoming more popular for parents to join their kids on the mats. There are a lot of parents that, you see and, you hear things like people are like, I would do anything for my kids. But it's like, my thought process is, well, will you live for your kids? Right? Like, will you take all the steps necessary to put forth the work and effort and sweat and all the things that you have to do in order to ensure that you're going to increase, not just your lifespan, but a health span. You want to be healthy with your kids as long as possible. And it's great that you're bringing them in and you're doing these things. But if you are not, I mean, kids mimic what they see. So if you bring them in for jujitsu for an hour, that's great. Right? It is good for them. And I'm glad that you do that. I'm glad for service. But long term, it's not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough to keep them healthy. And it's not going to be enough to keep you healthy. And, you have to start viewing these things as, these costs. Everything in life has a cost, right? The idea is, what is the relative cost and what is the return on my cost? In business, we're always about ROI. What's the ROI, return on investment, right? It's the same thing. No matter what you do, you're investing your money, right? Like every time you go to McDonald's, you are investing in McDonald's. And if you're not a shareholder, you're investing negatively into your health at the expense of yourself to profit others, right? And so like, that's how you have to view things. It's like you are investing, like Dan invests in his health, right? He does, he pays to train, he pays to, it's just like he just bought some new shoes, right? Because he walks all the time. That's an investment for him. It is a cost. Of course, everything in life costs something, but having good shoes so he can continue to go on his walk so he doesn't slip and fall and break his hip is an investment, right? So it's a
Yep.
cheap investment that, right now doesn't seem like much, but in 10 or 20 years, if he has worn out shoes and he's, hits a slick spot up one of the hills and he's 70 years old, that's one of the leading indicators of how people die is they fall and they don't get back up, and his ability to have strength and stability. And I was just thinking about this when you were talking is you had that unfortunate slip in the backyard, half a year ago or whenever that was.
Yep.
And you hit your head really hard. And looking back on it now, like, you really had hit your head pretty hard, but you also recovered super well. Right. But if you had not been physically active and mobile and doing those things, it might have put you up for a really long time, right? I mean, it's just
Yep.
your resiliency to things that are going to happen to you are going to be correlative to your overall condition, right? It's like so what Zach and I always say is right, be hard to kill, right? Like Zach could slip and fall 100 times and he's gonna be fine. It's my wrestling
Yep.
coach. And but you have someone who's in their 70s who hasn't worked out in 35 years, they slip and fall, and then that's it. That's the last thing that'll ever happen to them that means it. And it doesn't have to be that way. Obviously time is gonna come for us all, but you have to start investing in your ability to be strong and mobile now. Because like that's one thing is like as I'm edging out of the 30s, I'll be 35 soon. It's like I keep telling myself it's like I gotta put more work in now. I gotta put more work in now because it's never like now is the easiest time for me. Like if I want to say I want to add 10 pounds of muscle, right? Overall
Yep.
in the next 5 years. Right now is the easiest time to do it. It's not going to be easier when I'm 40. It's not going to be easier when I'm 45. It's not going to be easier when I'm 50, right? It's still doable. I see people all the time in those spaces that can do it. And consistency over time is going to make it easier for me because that's how I've been well trained for the last 10 years. But if I want to achieve a big goal that has to do with, competition or training or strengths or whatever it is, it's never going to be, it's like, there's no going back in time, right? The easiest time to gain muscle is now, whatever your age is, the easiest time is now. And
Yep.
waiting is not going to make it easier.
There's a couple of points that you may not want to hit on. One, compare it like financial investments, right? If you start investing at 25 and you're investing a couple $100 a month, that grows over time. And it's not the exact same curve with fitness, but it's similar in the way. And later in life, you're going to draw down on that money that accumulated over time. And you want to pile there and you want to make it easy. So if you're training consistently and building muscle through all that time, you're going to draw down on that muscle later when you don't have the as much testosterone in your body, or you don't have as many hormones in your body that will allow you to produce that muscle, right? So you want to build it up because you will lose it later in life. And that's okay because that's how life works. We want that. That's what's going to happen. So you should be prepared for that. Same thing in your financial life. It's a very similar move. You want to build up a financial war chest and you're going to burn down that money later in life. That's how it works. And the other thing you hit on, I was just listening to, I almost said reading, but I almost never read books. I got them on tape while I walk the dog. See, that's another thing. You go out and get a walk or get a workout in. Paul listens to music, but drive. I think you laughed at me because I always listened to podcasts when I was working out back in the day, but still do when I'm walking podcasts or books, audiobooks. But I get a lot in, and I just listened to one called The Cultural Code by Daniel Coyle, pretty famous book on organizational culture, and it's talking about how they gave kids and like Harvard, like engineers and a bunch of different groups, like this challenge to build a tower. And the kindergartners beat everybody because the kindergartners just started throwing sticks on the tower and telling each other to move the sticks around while everybody else sat back and planned out the perfect tower and built it. And but Paul was saying too, if you've got kids or you're working with kids, be around them, do the things with them because you want to keep that mentality in your brain too, that limitless mentality, or the ability to have no filter, to just be able to say, hey, move that up, move that over here, do this. And that was the whole idea because they had, we joked about it from Star Trek, but the absolute candor people that were on Picard. But that's what it is. The kids have absolute candor. If you need to move the stick to make the tower higher, they're going to tell you. And I've watched it in your own gym. In fact, I won't call out the name, but I just watched a kid guilt the dad into getting on the mat the other day
Yeah.
because dad and son come in and son's in the gi and dad's, oh, I didn't bring a gi. And son's, oh, go get a gi. And you were like, oh, yeah, I have some gis. And son guilted the dad to come roll with it. And but it was cool. Like it was that moment. Like son is like, no filter, right? He basically told his dad he didn't want to do it that day.
Yeah.
And then he got out there and did it. And you want to be
It's,
around,
you know,
whether it's friend group, workout group, somebody that will hold you accountable, whether it's kids that are always going to hold you accountable because they'll tell you exactly what they're thinking at any time. You want to be around that energy when you're doing something like this. And it's neat. We went through several of the hows, the point 0.7. So we're the improved diet to get to that point 0.7. So diet's going to be 1,800 to 2,200 calories a day. That was the loss Paul's talking about. We subtracted from the basal metabolic rate plus the workout. So that was around 2,800 calories a day to maintain. And then we took out the pieces. You heard Paul doing the calculations earlier in the podcast that I would need to lose. So that's that 22. So if you go 2,800 minus 22, that's 6 times 7, that's 4,200 calories. So it was actually a little bit higher than what Paul said on that 3,500. So our calculations for me were a little bit higher. So make sure you run a calculator on that. There are a couple of them online. I'm happy to share what I used, but make sure when you're starting, we actually may adjust my calories up and we'll share that in a second, like why that might happen. And you want to make sure you're making adjustments. Other things too, right now, I do want to stress when we went back to that goal, the goal was a body fat percentage of 15%. And then we said the goal weight was 173. That could change because if I build more muscle during this process, then that's going to increase my weight, which is fine. We're not worried about that, but that would adjust the bottom number. So you might see abs faster because I might have a 15% body fat at 181 pounds instead of 173 pounds if I put on substantially more muscle. Now, I don't see that happening very likely in a 30-week cycle, but it could, right? So we're going to be monitoring that as you build strength. The last thing for me, and this doesn't have to be for everybody, but to what Paul was talking about, is to increase the cardio or do a little bit more HIIT training. So what Paul does, and I can let him explain, but for me for cardio is what he'll usually do is he'll have me carry around heavy things. He already talked about that, which is going to have movement and then that'll put strain on you, which will elevate your heart rate, right? If you're carrying things that are heavy and you're moving around, it's going to put weight on you. And then he does this other evil feat thing. He has me ride this bike with a giant fan on the front. Tell him
yeah,
about this stupid bike. I hate this thing.
yeah, yeah. If you don't hate this thing, I think I always feel like you're doing it wrong. Yeah, we have an Air 9 bike. We have an Assault Air 9 bike. Uh, no affiliation, but if they want to send me a new one, I'll take one. It's the original Assault one. The new Rogue ones actually I think they're worse. I think I might get one just for you. They're even
Thanks.
harder, I think, than the original one. But we do so in my competition training, we do higher interval training, 20 seconds, 10 seconds all out, 20 seconds on. There's a lot of different ways. Sometimes in competition training, we'll do solid state. But I've really found that like 10-second, because the thing measures watts output. So like it tells you how much energy you're putting out. And so like during competition training, we have a minimum watt. It's like you have to hit this, like you are failing if you don't hit this watt output. And so that gives you, again, being able to measure things, it gives you an objective standard of like how hard you need to be going. And it's so funny because in comp class, I always say it's like, I know what the fan sounds like when it's hitting like 750 watts. I know exactly what that sounds like. And so I'll be in the middle of rolling and wrestling and doing whatever. And like we're cycling one person onto that bike during rounds. And I'm like, it's not loud enough. You're not working hard enough. I can hear that the fan is not loud enough. And so that's, I'm a big fan of high interval training or high intensity interval training, however you're defining that these
HIIT.
days. It. And I think that it's, for me, it's always been an efficiency thing. I loathe, everyone who knows me knows I loathe running. I only am running when I have to make weight. I jog at the beginning of classes, like a little bit, but just as far as like sheer runner's world, not my jam. My least favorite thing. I'd rather row or do the step climber or
Yep.
lifting, pretty much anything that's not just running. If running is good for you, you should do it. I do it because I have concerns for my heart health and overall, I think, if you're doing it right and in moderation, it's really, really good for you. So you should do it. But for me, the most bang for my buck is some sort of HIIT training. I started when I first did my weight loss journey. I went from about 210 pounds to maybe 250 at my highest. all the way down to about 155. So it was kind of like the thinnest I had been in a really, really long time. Didn't have the same, muscular buildup like I have now, but I started with like at home hit training and like just like old school P90X stuff and basic, what was it, like the insanity tape or whatever. It works, man. And for me, it was just like, it was super hard. It was like 45 minutes and then you're done. And it's
Yep.
like, I could get through that, especially when I was really out of shape, trying to get back into shape. And I was like, now I work out all day, every day. But at the time, it was like, that was killing me. The first couple of times I did it, like 20 minutes in, I'm dying. I was huffing and puffing and laying around my living room and couldn't get through the 40-minute tape. And now it's like, 40 minutes for my warm ups now. And
Yep.
so, all that to say is, for me, um, is just, you can do more. You absolutely can do more than you think that you can. I've done some pretty crazy things that I never, ever, ever would have thought I could have done, uh, including, vying for the world record in one. And you can do more. If you think, however you feel about them, the kind of the David Goggins rule, like if you think that you're done, you're probably at 40%. I feel like that's like, there's some truth to that. Like you can, whatever it is that you're doing in life when it comes to work output, just getting on a general path of self-improvement. Once you start on that path of self-improvement, you're going to be amazed what you can do.
So let's summarize the hows here. So one, the goal was that 0.707 or point 0.7. Sorry, I said 0.7. I don't know why I said that, but point percent or point 0.7. Geez, can I say words? We're losing 0.7% of my weight per week. But to do that, we're tracking diet. So we're tracking calories daily. I'm tracking it in a free, you can pay for this app too, but it's a free app called Fat Secret. It seems to work pretty well. It also syncs with Google Fit. So if you want to do it that way, I don't use Apple products. So I'm sure people have an Apple way to do it that's much better, but I'll slum with my Google OS or with those systems. That's fine. With Android OS, I'm also maintaining workouts. How am I maintaining workouts? I'm training with the trainer. So that's one thing I'm doing. So Paul's my accountability coach there. I'm making sure I do workouts. When I travel out of town for work or do different things, he also like scouts the gym for me and I'll take a picture of the gym and he'll say, do these things. So that's very helpful. Like I said, it doesn't, and again, I pay for Paul to do this with me. And you could too, quite frankly, if you like what I'm doing, go see Paul. He'll help you. But the other thing too, you could do it with that. You could do it with accountability partner. You could do it with a group. I don't care how you get there, but make sure you have somebody that's accounting with you, right? Because that's the way you're going to stay accountable for your goals. And then the last thing we're doing is so that's the diet piece. We're maintaining the workouts and we're increasing the cardio training in some way, right? So whether that's Paul making me carry heavy sandbags around the gym once a week, or that's me running uphill half a block instead of just walking up the hill with the dog. There's different ways we're increasing the cardio a little bit to build that up. I also may get into some cycling during this process, but will not be starting that in November in the middle of the rain and cold in the Pacific Northwest. So that'll probably pick up a little bit later in this journey. So that's the summary on the how we're going about this. And then the last thing I will say is, as I mentioned when we set up the why, if you go through a journey like this and you do plan on any sort of, and I would say dropping your body fat percentage from 29 0.8% to 15 is drastic. So do make sure you're seeing a medical provider on a regular basis as you go through the journey. If you're my age, if you're Paul's age, probably still should too, but I know Paul won't, so I'm not going to tell him to. But you probably should do that too. I wouldn't neglect that. Especially, I think people don't realize a lot of times, like their insurance gives them a free yearly medical exam. You should definitely be taking care of that, right? So if you're working and you have insurance, use it. Yeah, don't don't throw away the free opportunity to have access to medical care. And then what I want to get into last, so we've explained the why and the how. We've explained the why, the goal, and the how. So let's talk about the limits. So I do have a couple of limits. One I've mentioned already. I don't have an ACL in my left knee. That's where a lot of our discussion about can and can't came about. So I kept saying I can't do that because of my knee. We took the I can't language out. I recommend you do it for your limitations too. However, that doesn't mean I can't go crazy. I'm not going to start training in Paul's jujitsu classes tomorrow. because that is something that would absolutely destroy my leg if I did that. So, could I do jujitsu? The answer is absolutely yes. I could do it. Is it advisable for me to do jujitsu? I have an expert telling me no, that's probably not advisable. I had another person that works, what was that group? The warrior group? You're
With
blanking, but
no.
is is the veterans group.
Oh, the We Defy people.
We Defy, yeah, the We Defy folks. I met somebody with the We Defy group locally, and he's, oh yeah, you get in the gym, do jujitsu. I'll hook you up with these coaches. They've been working around people's injuries, right? So there is ways to do it, but in my case, we've decided not to do that for now. But
And
I say that just to say, don't limit yourself in your do, but acknowledge your limits, but don't limit yourself completely by when you acknowledge them.
yeah, and that's not to say that don't know people. I think Nikki Ryan is one of the notorious people who doesn't have an ACL, but that is also going to come back to be a significant hindrance later on in his life. And Dan's situation too is not just that he doesn't have an ACL, but Dan has had multiple ACL surgeries, and even shifting his knee a certain way it can cause significant swelling and really long-term pain, which is probably going to be spiking his cortisol. So this is not I have had many of my own knee injuries over the years and know lots of people with knee injuries. So I was like, just go ahead and do it. It's a cost and benefit thing. Right? It's like Dan said, could he do it? Sure. I know Dan could do some jujitsu, but
Maybe.
it's going to be antithetical to the overall health, well-being, and goals that he set for himself. So
I would
keep that
also
in mind.
say, like, my stamina levels, not stamina with cardio, but, like, my walking stamina, like, I can walk forever, right? That's not an issue. My cardio levels, because of second limitation, also take a hit in activities like this, no pun intended to saying hit exercises. But, I do have asthma, and I do have some limitations there too around that. Specifically, I mentioned workout-induced asthma, but also cold. So if I'm breathing in cold, that will often trigger an asthma attack. So I'm careful about a couple of those limitations. Stress is another limitation. I have immense stress from both my job and the cortisol that pumps through my body because of my knee injury. So when Paul said, yeah, I've had 5 different knee surgeries and no ACL now. And the last time I tore it was very traumatic. It was like a break of the tibia and tearing of the ACL, wrecked my bicycle, my big 29-inch wheel bike. Brilliant. So gave myself and we'll add that to limitation number 4, which I just added during the podcast because Paul reminded me, multiple concussions. So I'm sure some of you have probably experienced this, but when I was a kid, that was probably the first one. I got a concussion, falling straight on my face, got my feet tangled up as a little kid with my best friend, deviated my septum, had to get that fixed later in life. So that led to some problems early on with breathing, which could have to do with some of the other breathing issues and some of the fear of breathing, right? So that I think those things are related. But I have had between the bicycle crash, Paul mentioned the fall in the backyard. I just seem to hit my head a lot, which I don't want to be have too much levity over, but it is funny. When I start thinking about it, please don't laugh at me, laugh with me, but or laugh at me. I don't care. But that piece, I don't now I'm erring, but you made me think about that too. The concussions are a limitation. So I think again, when we talk about things like jujitsu or sports where you're falling on a mat and slamming your back down, probably not the smartest thing for me to be doing at 50 years old. It doesn't mean I can't do it. We took the I can't, but is it advisable to do things that are concussion related sports? And I would say my coordination is not above average. So when I'm doing jujitsu, playing racquetball, whatever that is, I wouldn't say it's the smoothest, cleanest movements. I think that Paul would even say he's seen me do racquetball before and things like that. I would get to the ball. Now, how I get to the ball is sometimes a miracle of some sort, and I don't know how I get there. It's just getting harder to get back up now. So I think the concussion thing also is a limitation we probably should be acknowledging in this because, yeah, there are probably some activities or some sports that probably shouldn't make my number one list of how I'm losing weight. There shouldn't be my number ones on my journey.
Right.
But that's pretty much it. So we've gone through it all. The why, the how, or the why, the goal, the how, and the limits. And we're here on a journey, and we have our first update because I started this a couple weeks ago. So when did we do this weigh in? That was Monday, right? Or no, last Friday. So it would have been on the 20
I don't remember my phone.
22nd. It was on the 22nd. So we're gonna do another weigh in tomorrow. So I know I'm recording on Thanksgiving, so I don't know if I want to do that weigh in tomorrow, but we're gonna do it anyway. But we've got a scale. So I told mention that we start out the journey at 29.8% body fat. And my last check-in, we were at 28.4%. So has gone down a little bit, and that's good. And I know it's gonna fluctuate. So if it goes back up tomorrow, I'm not gonna get discouraged. We're just gonna keep moving right along with what we're doing and keep moving toward that 15% goal. Weight was already also down from 211 to 2. Where is it on there? I'm looking at it. It's literally right in front of me. 205.1. Lost a little bit. That's actually faster. The 4.4 pounds down is 4.4 pounds down. So that's a little bit faster than we wanted, but that's okay. That way it's going to fluctuate as we go through. If that continues to be too fast, we're going to reevaluate that calorie intake, like we mentioned, per day. If I'm hitting 18 to 2200 now, I've been hitting more on the 1800 side of that 2200. So Paul and I talked about probably should be hitting closer to the 2200 calorie side of that 1800 to 2200. So that's our number one first update. And that's where it's at. We'll keep the updates moving every week. If we don't hit a podcast in a week, I'll still try to get the updates out to everybody. So even if Paul and I can't podcast together, because Paul's about to go to Brazil.
Brazil. Brazil. Yeah. Look out, bro.
We may not do one together, but I'll probably do a short update just to let you know how I'm doing and where I'm at in the journey. And I don't know, depending on what the audience response is like, I can start sharing different, like the fat secret information, right? The calorie counts. I'm happy. Full disclosure, I'll put whatever up you want to see. We're not lying to you. We're not making up a story. This is what's happening. So I'll have full transparency on the weight and the body fat percentage and what I'm eating. And we'll go from there. And if you want to see more stuff, that's fine. And last thing I would say, if you're in the Pacific Northwest and you want a trainer or you want to learn jujitsu, you can go see Paul. He's at Certified Martial Arts on Bridgeport/Jackson Avenue. So it's the last exit on Highway 16 if you're coming from the north. And if you're coming in from other directions, that's fine. Go to 27th and Bridgeport and you can see Paul at Certified Martial Arts. And I also have another podcast. It's right on my shirt. If we do video, you'll see it on the shirt. If not, it's called Funny Book Forensics. Very different than this. Probably not going to be the audience for everybody that's here, but that's okay. If you want to hear my buddy and pal, Greg Smith, and I talk and banter about comic books, go there. Look, and the last thing I'll say is I'm a giant geek. I'm a giant uncoordinated geek. I'll label myself that way. And I'm making this happen. Like I've been training for a long time. If I can do this, literally anybody. Because Paul, you can laugh. I am when it comes to coordination of people, persistence, I probably rank a little bit higher in some things, but
Like,
coordination, not so much.
yes. If I had $1 for every time I had to answer, am I doing this correctly? And the answer was no, you're doing it backwards. I would eliminate all of my debts.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
whole right and left thing is a struggle. So anyway, let's wrap this one up. Paul, do you have anything to plug at all for on your end?
No plugs here. Take your creatine, hit those weights, get after it.
Drink lots of water.
Drink lots of water. Yeah. Pickle juice if you crave.
Ugh. Yeah, that's you, not me. Anyway, all right. That wraps up this episode, but we look forward to seeing you in a week or so. And we'll get some more information out there about how this journey is. And if you want to follow us, we're going to be posting these on most of the podcast places you can get them. So definitely we'll be going up on YouTube, Google Music will be up there, but we'll be on your other podcast pieces too. I'll happily submit to Apple, even though I don't use their products. That's fine. Also, you can follow us on Instagram. So many places. Geez. Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky, X. For now, X may go away. I don't know. I don't know how
Nope.
long I'll stay there. But we're
Nope.
definitely
TikTok.
going to go Instagram, Twitter, and Blue Sky for sure. I said Twitter. That's not what I meant. We're definitely going Instagram, Blue Sky, and Facebook for sure.
No, no. Copy of takes.
We may get to TikTok, so that may happen too. And if we're up there, you'll know. So I literally have the sign up page up in front of me actually as we speak. And I'm supposed to put in a code and then we started podcasting. So we'll see how far I get.
Okay.
But other than that, yeah, look for us different places and we'll do our best to get ourselves out in front of you because, hey, I'm doing this, but we think you probably could get on a journey of your own. So why not?
Abs at 50 or sooner.
Yeah, abs at 50 or sooner. Yeah, it doesn't have to be just 50. Don't wait till you're 50 to start.
Yeah.
But as we told you, I didn't just start at 50, right? But now that's the goal for the year. So let's roll. Abs at 50. We'll see you in a couple weeks.